Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Scotland. Welcome to this magnificent football stadium. Celtic Park has been a wonderful stage for Norwich City's penultimate pre-season friendly this evening, as they played Scottish Champions Celtic, and it was a very, very good test. Actually, I think Dean Smith will actually probably be walking away from this one pleased with what he has extracted out of it. And Norwich City have lost. They've lost 2-0 here this afternoon today. And it is their first defeat of a pre-season campaign, which overall, before this point, was unbeaten and did hold, probably from a results perspective, a little bit more positivity. Tonight, I think there's probably some conflicting emotions as we sit here today and reflect 1 week onto the season with Norwich City preparing, of course, for life in the Championship. They travel from Scotland to Wales next week, from Celtic to Cardiff, to kickstart their Championship campaign. Probably, if I'm being honest with myself, you'd probably want to see Norwich City look a little bit further along than they do at the moment. Still somewhat of a work in progress. Still feels like there is some areas that they need to address, and we'll come on to those in a moment. But by the same token, there was some good moments here today, and I don't want that to get lost in kind of what we were about to discuss and what we were about to talk about and discuss from this game, because they've been beaten 2-0. One of those goals actually was offside. The second one probably came from a defensive error. And there was still, I felt, some defensive frailties within this Norwich side. But by the same token, there was also some stuff they did well. They're pressing a lot better, and that's probably a consistent theme that we've seen out of pre-season. They're engaging teams higher up the pitch. They're counter-pressing in an intelligent way. They defensively have been relatively sound. There was one defensive mistake today from Sam McCallum that cost them a goal. But beyond that, there is a bit more of a defensive structure, a defensive cohesiveness to what they're trying to do. And also, on the flip side of kind of everything that I've said and will say, Celtic are a very good team. I've just spoken to Kenny McLean, and he feels that he's a Rangers fan, by the way, so you can no one can accuse his judgment of being biased because he's Scottish or whatever. He's a Rangers fan, and he feels both Celtic and Rangers could do a job in the Premier League in terms of their quality threshold. And said that they're a very difficult team to play against. And actually what Ange Postecoglou has done here is produce a very well-coached team. They invert their fullbacks. They play with real purpose, real intensity, real drive. They move the ball well. There's some really nice combinations. They create a lot of angles for each other. They're a really good team to watch. And by the same token, you can tell that they get away with quite a lot of stuff every day at a weekend in Scotland because they play at a higher level than the average Scottish teams. And so what that produces is a team that we saw today, one that is willing to take risks, that has an identity, that is entertaining to watch, that is easy on the eye. They've got some wonderful players. Rayo Hafite in midfield is going to be a Premier League footballer in the not-so-distant future, that's for sure, because the quality that he's got, he was voted man of the match here today. I would completely agree. I thought he ran that midfield, to be completely honest. And Norwich City struggled to contain with Celtic when they were kind of in some of their possession phases and when they were kind of having to sit and containing and take a lot. But by the same token, they did a lot of stuff well. Todd Cantwell first half is joy to watch at the moment, the way he's playing football. Andrew Omobamidele, you wouldn't think he's 20, plays with such a mature head, plays with clarity, can see the football pitch, and what I mean by that is can see pictures all the time and plays with a real confidence. I know internally they refer to him as a little bit of a Rolls Royce, and he is exactly that. There was one moment in the first half where Celtic looked to thread a ball through basically the heart of Norwich City's defence, their two centre-backs, and he just come across and managed to cut it out superbly. It was a wonderful piece of intelligence to read the game. There was a bit in the second half where he was willing to take the ball forward over the halfway line, commit to Celtic and commit to the space and get Norwich up the pitch. That was good to see as well. And I do feel that we are closer to seeing what a Dean Smith team looks like. It's one that presses and wants to press with intensity. More on that in a little while. It's a team that does want to play out the back, but also isn't afraid of variation and isn't afraid to kind of mix it up. But by the same token, there remains a lot of real questions about their attacking elements and how they create chances, because this was one today. They had a header from Timu Pukki that he flicked over the bar from a Rashica cross. There was one shot from Rashica that Joe Hart got down and saved well. Andrew Omobamidele stabbed a ball that kind of deflected just over the bar. Sargent had a shot, and then Onel Hernandez had a shot later on. But beyond that, Norwich really struggled to create much. And I was kind of talking about this on the way down. You look at the goals they've scored in pre-season; they've all been different types of goals. They're not coming from a similar supply line or because of certain phases of play. They are just kind of happening because of circumstances on the pitch, sometimes by design, and I would point to the crossing elements to that. But what we saw under Daniel Farke, and it's difficult to keep going back to that, but also difficult to avoid it, is they had a clear system of how they would score a goal and how they would construct chances. And it still feels very stodgy, is the word I would use from an attacking perspective, because what you've got is, and you had it today, the front three of Sargent and Rosica either side of Teemu Pukki. You've got Josh Sargent, who, from a pressing perspective, presses very well, but avoids giving you any kind of creativity on the right. Rosica is someone who wants to be on the counter-attack, wants space to attack into. He's not a player who is willing to drop deep, pick the ball up and make something happen in kind of that way. He wants to have space to gallop into. He wants to play on the counter. He wants that 1v1 with the defenders on the back foot. And so you've got the situation where Norwich have got a really good presser on the right who, when he gets the ball, can't create a chance. And you've got a player on the left who, when they do press high and win the ball back, is kind of in a situation where he's struggling to really unlock defences, because that's not really the circumstance that he wants to find himself in as a winger. So then you're looking in this 4-3-3 formation to then have Todd Cantwell or Daniel Sinani drive some creativity from the middle if you want to have the front three as a really functional, effective pressing system. And they just haven't got that balance quite there yet. Todd Cantwell does that, I feel, at points. He can't do it on his own. Daniel Sinani, I thought, delivered some nice touches and there was a few nice passes, but didn't really create too much. And all of this equates to a little bit of a mismatch. And this is where my concern is with Norwich City at the moment, is I don't see how they create a consistent amount of opportunities this season. And you look at what Smith is trying to do. He wants a bit more athleticism and his team to be a little bit more dynamic and flexible and willing to press teams and engage them higher up the pitch. By the same token, it still feels like there's a real void of creativity in the squad and players who can make things happen. And when you think about the circumstances that they're going to be in this season, particularly at Carrow Road, there's going to be a lot of teams who arrive in NR1 and are hoping to play 2 blocks of 4, really condense the space and say, go on, then break us down. And at the moment, I'm struggling to see how Norwich have the tools in their arsenal at this moment in time, with the system that they're playing, with the philosophy that they're trying to implement, how they create that consistent stream of chances. And that's a concern, because I don't necessarily feel any different about that now than I did at the start of pre-season, when we probably wanted to see a few more indications that things were moving in the right direction. Now, look, this is pre-season. Sometimes teams can kickstart the campaign and look a completely different outfit to what they did in pre-season. That's a possibility. By the same token, I feel that, particularly with Smith, particularly what Norwich are trying to do, if you're trying to be sort of use methodology to work and trying to process the game in that way, still feels a little bit short to where they are at the moment. And there is a variation, there is a willingness to mix things up, and that's good. But by the same token, I don't quite see how this system, with Norwich City's squad, with what Dean Smith's trying to do, results in a huge amount of goals. I may be wrong, and I hope I am, but it's just how I feel standing here this evening, because I still look at it and I'm still not quite sure what route Norwich City are going to score a goal. And obviously they will score set pieces, they will score from crosses this season, a lot more than they have done in the last 2 years. But in open play, it still feels a little bit dysfunctional and a little bit of a work in progress, which, with 1 week to go to the season, is a slight concern, I would say, because you've got, as I said, players who are good in the press. Rosica is good in the press. Sargent is good in the press. Pukki is good in the press. But often, because they're pressing high, the midfield supports, they win the ball high up. They don't really carve out opportunities because of that. That might change when they're playing opposition in the Championship. But at the moment, I feel a little bit conflicted about where Norwich City are, because they're doing a lot of good stuff. As I said at the start, I think there's a lot of elements of their game that have improved from the start of the summer and will continue to improve. There are also elements where more work is required, and Kenny McLean kind of said that post-match, and I'm sure Dean Smith will watch the game, analyse the numbers, and come to that conclusion as well. And what that looks like for Norwich City moving forward feels really interesting. But yeah, it's difficult to really trying to describe how I feel about Norwich City is interesting. I've been asked in recent days to do a lot of season previews, and within those, quite often gets the question, where do you think Norwich are going to finish? And I go, I really don't know. I really don't know, because this team could ignite. They could go. Confidence could excel. Obviously, there's players returning. Felt like they probably needed a ball-winning midfielder in there today. When Isaac Hayden returns, which is not until the end of August, at the very least, hasn't had a pre-season really as well. So I think we'll be pushing into September. Maybe this midfield and Norwich team will have a bit more balance about it, and that will allow some of the creative players to go and be a bit more creative. But for me, it still feels a little bit stodgy in attack, and a lot of unfinished. A lot of questions that at the moment don't have answers, and that's probably where I am with 1 week to go of the season. In terms of this game, Celtic's opener came from an offside. It was an offside. It was. Maybe that gives the Norwich players, obviously no VAR in operation. There won't be any VAR in operation for the Championship either. Maybe it gives them a good taste of what some EFL officials may be like. I say that tongue in cheek, of course. There's a ball threaded through. It kind of comes off a Norwich man to Juranovic, who's offside, who then crosses to Maeda, who was offside in the first phase. And it's not even marginal. It's quite major. And what I think has happened is the officials have looked at it and feel that the deflection off a Norwich man is a deliberate touch. And I haven't actually gone through and checked the laws, but I'm pretty sure that if you make an active attempt, or there's a deliberate attempt to play the ball and it goes to the opposition, then I believe that would then class as onside. This wasn't a deliberate action to play the ball from a Norwich City player. He's just gone to make a tackle. It's gone off his leg. He's gone to Juranovic. He's crossed, and it's a lovely finish, to be fair. But the lad stood 4 yards offside. So we can unpick Norwich City's defence, but ultimately, if a player is at offside, you're just then looking at the officials to do their job and apply themselves correctly. The second one was slightly different. Sam McCallum made a defensive error, gave the ball away. Celtic turned it over. It came to David Turnbull, who was pretty close to becoming a Norwich player. I'm trying to think, first Premier League season, I think, maybe if I've got the timeline right, to the extent where he was actually at Colney at one stage before then U-turning and coming here to sign for Celtic. Looked very good when he came on, to be honest. Got it in the box, just managed to make a yard for himself and slot in the far corner. Angus Gunn kind of hapless in trying to keep that out. Very good strike, 2-0. Celtic, as I said, very well coached under Andrzej Postecoglou. Going to be playing Champions League football next year, irrespective of maybe the debate that you want to have about where exactly they'd fit into the English pyramid. It's always a bit of a futile debate, that one, but for what it's worth, I feel they'd be a Premier League team. Some of the players that they've got, the coach they've got is Premier League standard for sure. I feel they'll probably win the Scottish Premiership again. But as a test for Norwich City, this was really worthwhile. It did display their limitations. It did show the areas that Dean Smith still needs to work on, and Craig Shakespeare still needs to work on, and Liam Bramley and Alan Russell as well. It did show that there is still an element of work in progress about this Norwich side. But equally, they're not going to be playing against teams of that quality every week. So sometimes, and this is maybe the imponderable that will be answered, or the question that will be answered in the coming weeks, whether this side manages to, I don't want to use the word paper over, but overcome its flaws and its deficiencies against teams who aren't of the same quality of teams they're playing in pre-season. I'm yet to really see a consistent, maybe Marseille, but even for the opening 20 minutes of that, Norwich weren't particularly great, and pre-season is always really difficult to search for any kind of answers in terms of consistency. But in the final pre-season, the friendly, it was dress rehearsal, there'll be a lot of those players who are in that team today that will be playing at Cardiff next weekend. Just poses more questions, I think, for how Norwich City solve this creativity void that they've got in the squad. Maybe they will be good enough, and the squad will be good enough to bridge over that in the Championship. Maybe it won't, and that is something that we will find out the answers to in due course. That's the first video verdict done of the weekend. We are, of course, in Hibernian tomorrow for the second and final leg of Norwich City's mini Scotland camp. We're based in Edinburgh, actually, got the train across. So really looking forward to that game tomorrow at Easter Road. It's going to be a completely different 11. I suspect we'll see Hugill start, Hernandez start, your new list start, all the players who are kind of on the bench. There will be some players who played today feature because not all of them got 90 minutes. Grant Hanley went off with what looked like a slightly concerning knock. Hopefully he'll be okay. He did manage to go off, come back on, and then go through to half-time. Jakob Sørensen replaced him at half-time. I think that's about it. Dean Smith will have learned a lot about his squad today. And just to give the final word to the 700 Norwich City fans who came up for this game. I couldn't actually see you from where I was sat. It's kind of behind that grey kind of, I don't know, we just got almost like a fence kind of thing. It's not a fence, it's part of the stadium, but that's where they were based. So this is a magnificent stadium. So I'm going to leave you with what is a magnificent shot of a magnificent stadium. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday evening, and we'll see you tomorrow in Edinburgh for round 2. Thank you very much. See you soon. Here is Celtic Park.